Hello, I'm Gertrude, and this is the Tech Girl Podcast, the show where innovation meets impact. I believe that the best tech solutions come from a deep understanding of both people and code. That's why I'm here, to help you navigate the crossroads of developer relations and product management. If you're ready to learn, grow, and make a difference in tech, then this podcast is your guide. Let's get inspired together. Thank you so much for coming on the Tech Girl Podcast. I'm really excited to be chatting with you, Carly, and I can't wait for people to get to know you, those that don't, because you're a person that's out there. But I'm so excited and grateful that you're here with me today and for taking the time. How are you doing?
I'm very excited because we've been talking for maybe at least a year or two now.
It's been a year or two, yeah.
Wow. And yeah, we talked about podcasts and advocacy and all sorts of things. And it feels like this is a natural step to kind of share like what we've been talking about. So yeah, I'm really excited. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah. And I can't wait for you to just unpack all the many things that you've done, because you're someone whose career has been through many transitions, if I can call them that.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe before we get into all of that and where you are today, just tell us a little bit about how you got into your current role.
Yeah, so we'll focus on advocacy, and then we can, if we need to go further back into other roles, we can do that. So the way that I got into advocacy was I was a software engineer first. I'd actually been a software engineer for 10 years, albeit I'd done other roles like management, Scrum Mastery, all these other things. But the majority of that time, I was a software engineer and I worked at a large bank. In start of 2020, which was probably the worst time to engage in this activity, to be perfectly honest, I decided I wanted to do public speaking. And part of the reason for that was I was coming back from maternity leave. I'd had 6 months of looking after a tiny human who I do adore, but you know, your career does take a bit of a pause at that point, naturally.
Exactly.
And I wanted to build a skill and I wanted to do something for my career. And I thought, you know what, why don't I do public speaking? It's something that I had struggled with. It's something that actually people might find really weird seeing me on stage now, but I used to hate it. I used to feel always super nervous and sick and just wanted to avoid it at all costs. Even doing like a demo as a software engineer at the end of a sprint was something that I found actually quite nerve-wracking. But I got into public speaking through support from mentors and local meetup groups and an initiative called Global Diversity CFP Day, which sadly I don't think has came back post-pandemic, but it was a fab day. Literally, I went to that day and learned how to write an abstract and loads of useful tips about submissions and speaking and tech and things like that. And then literally started back at work on the Monday. So that was a packed weekend.
Yeah.
So obviously I started out mainly online because, you know, the world had other plans. And I actually found I really enjoyed it. Like there's such, it sounds weird, but there's such a rush associated with speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I loved, you know, connecting with people, which was something obviously I was wanting to do as well, expand my network outside of the company that I'd worked at for so long. So I ended up going to loads of meetups. I went and started speaking at conferences online and then later in person. And I found that was the bit that I enjoyed, that and because I'd blogged for years. So naturally, after a while, when I was kind of starting to get itchy feet and wanted to do something different, a friend of mine who does work in DevRel had said, well, these are the things you want to do. You're spending your weekends, you know, writing conferences when a little one's trying to pull you away going, Mummy, I want to play. And does it make sense to transition and flip and do something the other way? So that kind of got me thinking, and I went, you know what? I'll give it a try. The things that naturally put me off before applying to that point was a lot of travel, but I thought, give it a go.
Okay. Yeah.
So I applied for primarily, I think 3 or 4 different jobs in all advocacy positions.
Okay.
And then I went quite far in one process, but obviously that didn't work out, no problem. And then I ended up with 2 offers, one for Elastic and one for somewhere else. And then I ended up accepting the Elastic position. So I started at Elastic as a developer advocate in April of 2022.
Okay.
And just loved it.
Yeah.
Love going to conferences and speaking to people, love writing, love geeking out and playing with new technologies, which is basically my job, which is fun. And I get more time sometimes to code actually compared to when I was an engineer or manager. And then last year, in May 2024, got promoted from senior to principal, which was really cool.
Awesome. Congratulations on that again.
Thank you. And then a few months after that, I ended up taking over manager responsibilities. So as the team's grown, I'm now manager of the advocate team. So the way that we're structured in Elastic is that we've got like the whole DevRel team, and then within it, we've got, the advocates that I look after. So there's a team of like, I think 9 of us, 10 of us. And then you've got content programs, and then you've also got the program managers who work hand in hand with us and deal with all the logistics and all the kind of complex kind of stuff around sponsorships and arranging meetups and payments and all that kind of stuff. Basically, like I've got a wonderful program manager, Nisha, that I work with in the UK, who's my partner in crime, basically. And you know what? It's been great. It was nice to dive back into management again. The first time I tried it, I didn't think I was actually that good at it.
Okay.
But now it seems to be a bit more of a balance, and I still get to go to conferences and I still get to code. So I've got a nice balance going on. It's good.
The best of both worlds.
Yeah, I think in a weird way it is actually.
Yeah.
Just because it's funny. I love managing people. I love growing people. I love helping people with progressing, and not just with code, but content and things as well. It naturally fits with me as a human and what I like to do. But sometimes you do need something for yourself, firstly. But also, I feel like there's a lot of debate on this, particularly with more engineering management. But you need to sometimes lead from, within, and show and set examples. And I think part of the way that I like to do that is showing that I'm still doing it too, because it helps with setting expectations, which is good.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I haven't been in management before, but I do understand that when the manager is also involved in the work, it makes it easier to have like conversations and manage expectations, like you said. But yeah, let's talk about developer relations. You've touched a bit on what you do, but I still find that a lot of people get confused when you say like, I'm a developer advocate or I work in developer relations. So maybe in your own words, what is developer advocacy and what is developer relations?
Sure. So if we start with developer relations, that's basically the function. So quite often you'll see that a team will have developer relations. And the whole point of that organization is basically on developer reach out and education. Primarily in a function where our company, rather, where you have, developer focused tools is where it kind of all originates from, albeit probably now seeing it popping up in all sorts of other places. But it's all about, education on the use of these tools, how things can be used, but also it's a two-way conduit. It's also a mechanism for getting feedback on how these technologies are working, how people are using them, what's good about them, what's bad about them, and obviously being able to feed those latter two things back to relevant product teams. So it's a two-way conduit, basically, where we communicate with developers, help them with common problems and issues, but also then, really back how they're using things and any issues that are coming up. Developer advocacy is basically around advocating, I guess, in two ways, partially advocating for the developers themselves, which is what we talked about with the feedback. And we've all concerns on behalf of developers saying, this is not cool, or this is a problem, or this is broken, or this is a really good thing, opposingly, because you've got to know about the good things and the bad things. But also, championing for their interests and also advocating for the product and the technologies themselves, how they can be used, what's good about them, but doing it aesthetically and doing it honestly. It's funny because within Elastic, our developer relations function, we sit within engineering.
Yes.
We don't sit in marketing. And I know that we've had discussions about this, and I have
yes, where should developer
where should we fit? It's such a debate because funnily enough, when I started, like back in April 2022, as we were talking about before, we were part of a marketing function. Some things naturally made sense in terms of the kind of, the outreach is common with marketing.
Exactly.
But sometimes, the ways in which we go about it tend to be a bit different. Like, for example,
and the messaging sometimes.
Yeah, oh no, that messaging is something that we definitely talk about quite regularly when it comes to maybe more the product marketing side, because obviously they might build or write particular pieces in content, but that will be different to what I would write as an advocate. I'm going to try and avoid the buzzwords and the cringiness that sometimes makes you go a bit, oh, when you're a developer reading that, because you feel like you're kind of being, obviously it's necessary, and it's often trying to reach a different audience. It's more for decision makers generally, albeit there's a whole thing around developer marketing.
Yes.
And how that's different as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like more of I don't feel like marketing. I was kind of quite happy when we moved back engineering. It felt like coming home in a way, because when I'm building code and content, I'm trying to think about it as a developer, and I'm trying to show how you would do things, what kind of challenges you'll come up against, and try and do it with an authentic voice and try and be honest. So that can sometimes be a bit weird, because sometimes you might have to be honest and point out something that doesn't work or something that's not right.
Exactly.
But you need to do it authentically, because I'm not marketing, and I'm quite happy not to be.
Yeah. And there've been conversations about developer relations also fitting into product and maybe product management. Sometimes I've heard, but somewhere in the product family. Yeah, I guess it's different from company to company, solution to solution, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had some really fab conversations with some of our kind of internal people, because we've also got, it's not just developer relations that might have content or might have developer specific interests. So if you have a group that's specifically responsible for the SDKs that sit on top of your product, for example, like we do at Elastic, we have a tool team that look after all of our language clients. They still have elements of advocacy to their role as engineers as well, because quite often going out to conferences and meetups like I do, they're responsible for a developer focused, very heavily integrated into the developer experience. So they want to speak to developers and get that feedback, and that try and partner and help them as much as possible. But there's also a case to be said about documentation, about where that fits as well. So you could debate, these are kind of related activities, and you could debate quite heavily, because they sit in product. They sit with engineering in our case, but they're related to the product experience as well. So
exactly.
I'm not sure we've all figured it out yet, to be honest.
No, I don't. I don't think so either. And everyone does it the way that works best for them. But it's interesting that tooling sits elsewhere that you mentioned, because that's something I have learned.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so it's basically part of our search function. So we have our engineering org that is structured in different ways around the types of solution that we have and platform and things. But yes, the developer tools for the SDKs sit within search, and we sit there too. So yeah, but we're all part of engineering, one big happy family.
Yeah. Yeah. And which leads me to like my other question, because when we talk about developer relations as the umbrella, and developer advocacy as part of that umbrella, there's a question of skills that are needed to be a developer advocate. And maybe then that doesn't necessarily reflect what kind of skill set you will need to be part of developer relations, because you could be depending on the company and the solution, you could be part of developer relations, but not necessarily an advocate. But maybe specifically we can focus on being a developer advocate and the kind of skills you need for that.
Yeah, of course. So I get asked this question a lot, because I think, because we've just talked about a lot of people don't know what a developer advocate is. It's still relatively new as a role. It needs to be compared to some of the other traditional roles in tech. Or some people really like the idea of, going to a lot of conferences and travel. They think, oh, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
So I do get asked a lot this question of, what skills do I need to be an advocate? So this is my list. You'll probably find others will think of extras on, but I think the main things is, firstly, you need to be able to code and write code. I've certainly seen across the industry different advocacy positions or things like developer relations engineer and things. There's kind of different expectations on how technically deep you need to be able to go into things, but Elastic want our advocates to be pretty technically deep and have engineering experience. That's how you're going to build content that kind of fits that right nuanced level, and be able to talk to developers in common language and vernacular is by, being there, done that, and having the t-shirt, basically, and maybe the cap too. So being able to code is a must. Being able to speak publicly, like I talked about how I started and got in, very imperative, because, you're going to have to speak at conferences and meetups. If you're not comfortable standing up in front of a room and talking to people, you're going to find that aspect of the role very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to write content. You need to be able to problem solve, both in terms of if you're trying to play with early versions of things and stuff is breaking, you need to be able to do things like reading code, reading error messages, trying to problem solve and figure them out and search for the answers. Which sometimes I think seeing, because we also look after forums as well, a lot of time, and at Elastic, that's definitely something we do. We answer questions, so that'd be another thing, answering questions on forums. But you need to be able to solve problems, read the documentation, try and figure things out, and then also try and know when to reach out for help when you're really stuck as well, and being able to leverage like an internal network of engineers to try and help you out. And then I think one of the big things on top of that as well is you need to want to tinker and play with tech and learn new things. If you want to just sit and kind of use the same stuff all the time, that can be a bit of a hindrance in my view, because tech moves so quickly all the time. The tools are changing all the time. If you don't like kind of playing and experimenting with things, then you might find you end up running out of things to talk about or things to write about quite quickly. You need to always be on the lookout for new things to learn and play with and then talk about and share. So I guess that's probably the main ones I would say. Do you have any other ones that you would add on?
I definitely like the ones that you have put out, especially, I really like documentation. I think that's one of the most important entry points for developer experience, which unfortunately gets neglected. So yeah, documentation is the one for me, and writing and how you present it in different formats, I would say, is really important, like you've mentioned. As you're speaking, I was just wondering, for some of these skills, right, it's easy to list them on a CV, right? But you are on the hiring side and have been on the hiring table. How are you able to, let's say, distinguish candidate A from candidate B? And even when you have that interview, maybe what are some of those things that you can speak about as a candidate in order to really bring out this skill set? I mean, the technical skills, you will have the technical interview, so that will show. But some of these kind of soft skills, how can you bring them out as a candidate, and how do you identify them as a hiring manager?
Cool. So we'll start from the candidate side first, and then I'll move on to more the manager hiring side. So the best advice I ever got on how to showcase these skills was actually from Trisha G, who's a super prominent and amazing advocate.
Yeah.
Because I was asking this question of, how do I highlight these things in my CV? And her immediate answer was, well, you need a portfolio, not a CV.
Mm.
And I definitely, from my experience, I agree. I wouldn't have this job if I hadn't thought about it that way. So on your CV, you'll list these things, but they need to be somewhere that's available centrally and updating all the time, because I'm also, as a hiring manager, looking at not just are you doing these things and have evidence of it, but also are you still doing it, or is it something that's maybe dropped and got stale? It's not always necessarily a problem because people get busy with work and personal lives, but I'm still looking at how relevant and how regular you're doing this. So from the kind of candidate side, I would have a personal website of some description. You could also use things like the README on GitHub.
Yeah.
Personal README. I use that as well. It's quite good. So that, a personal website. And on that, I have listings to my talks, including things like a playlist of sample talks I've given from meetups and conferences that are published on places like YouTube or other video platforms. I've got my blogs on there. I've got any papers or publications I've done. So if I've written pieces for places like InfoQ, or you might have written somewhere like Hacker Noon, Medium, whatever it is, have somewhere where all that information's in one place so that you can actually, it's visible for me to be able to find it and have that on your CV as well, because then you're
I'm taking down notes here.
Notes are great. So yes, showing off that evidence. I think you don't have to have everything, but you need to show the main ones you've got. So for me, I had videos of my public speaking before I got this role, which was obviously quite important. And I had that because I'd been accepted to conferences as an engineer and they had recorded and put it up. So I didn't need to do anything specific. But I have other colleagues, like I've got my colleague Ulia, who's super into video and is amazing at it. So she had her own YouTube channel before she joined us. And obviously that showed what she could do. I also had, my content, my writing. Now at the time, my writing was mainly geared towards Scrum Mastery and things like that, but I did have technical content as well. So also look at the level of the technical depth. Even other things that I don't have listed, like if you're a maintainer or a contributor to an open source project, if I have somewhere where I can see your code, even if it's a toy example on GitHub, that's fine. I can see what you're doing. So then on the manager side, firstly, I am going to read your CV when it comes through to me.
Okay.
Secondly, I'm going to look for these things. I'm going to do searches and I'm going to see if I can find example videos of you speaking to see what it's like, what your style's like, how do you convey the information? Can I get any indication from the questions that are being asked, how engaged the audience are, things like that? I'm going to look at your code. Is it well structured? Does it follow good conventions and practices? Has it got tests in it? Things like that. I'm going to look at the pieces you write. If I find a profile on like social medias like LinkedIn and things, I'm going to look and see what you're sharing. More for an indication of, maybe you're sharing other people's content, which is a really nice thing to do. And is another thing that an advocate would do as well. It's not just about us writing and sharing all of our stuff. We also share what developers in the community are doing and writing and sharing as well. That's part of the gig. So I would look for all of these things and kind of make sure they're at the level I would expect based on, is it a junior position or a more senior or principal position? And then normally a lot of advocate processes, well, they're all different and have different stages. You might have actually some form of take-home assessment. So we do have one of those where we basically, we want to see what you can do in terms of coding, and then we'll follow that up with an interview where you need to explain, how it works, what issues you came across, which is also a good opportunity to show how you present technical content as well, if you think about it. And then the obvious things for any interview, like making sure you research the company, have a think about questions you want to ask in advance, come prepared to the interviews is something else that I'm looking for as well. And also if you're okay saying I don't know to things.
Yeah.
Because
that's, I wouldn't have thought that one would be on the list, because when you're in an interview process, I mean, I know I'm one of those people that would definitely say it, but there's always the pressure to kind of be perfect or as close to perfect as possible. But it's good to know that you mentioned that, just be okay with saying, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I used to have this with engineers because when I was a software engineer before, I used to do tons of graduate recruitment for like the internship and graduate roles for the bank and, obviously software engineering roles. And this would come up all the time. How do they handle information that they don't know? And the thing is, you don't want someone that's going to make it up. Now, I'm not saying it's malicious that they're going to be making it up here, by no means. It's just, as you said, it's really weird and feels vulnerable and uncomfortable to say I don't. And when you're in a work setting that's, potentially competitive and stuff, that can be a bit weird to say and do. But I'm always looking for you to say, I don't know. Now, engineers, you would expect them to say, I don't know, but maybe have a guess that's logical based on their experience. Or they would say, I don't know, but if it works similar to this thing that I've seen in my career, I would assume it would work this way. Or based on this information, I would assume it would work this way, and this is why. And that's okay to say. Now, sometimes you're in a situation, you just need to be honest and say, I don't know. But it's kind of like being able to, in both instances, you need to be able to say, I don't know, and then be honest that you're making an educated, logical guess, or that you're going to try. Don't just say it's this. And then if you're questioned or told it's incorrect, stand your ground and be stubborn, because that comes across badly.
Yeah.
But in both of these situations for interviewing, so please don't do that.
Oh, no. Oh. Yeah, that would, no. Because I guess that response as well fits into the culture, which is something that a lot of people sort of overlook when you're joining a company or looking to join a company. Is like that culture fit, because most companies want to work with people that are honest and have integrity, because it sits on that as well. You can't just be stubborn about not knowing something and acting like you do.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that's often missed is interviewing is a two-way street. You're being assessed. We know the obvious one. You're being assessed by a company as part of this process to see if you are the right candidate for this role, that you're going to fit into the team and company culture, and that you kind of adhere to the values that they're expecting. And, you know, the obvious things like qualifications and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're also evaluating the company. You're looking at it to say, am I going to, particularly if I go back to, I was applying for advocacy roles coming from engineering, have an idea of what the role is from speaking to other people that were advocates at the time. But, you know, I'm also using it as an opportunity to figure out, am I going to like this role? Is this role fit with my, you know, what I want to do and achieve in my career? Does the company and the team feel like somewhere I want to work with? Am I going to be happy working with these people every day? Are there any red flags of culture that I don't think I'm going to enjoy?
Uh-huh.
No, are they going to be honest with me? Things like that, you know?
Yeah.
When you're a candidate being interviewed, you're evaluating those things. And maybe that's a good point for interviewers. You know, you need to remember as well that this is a two-way street. So I remember interviewing grads, and we would do the initial training for like new people coming in to start. And sometimes like the HR rep would talk about kind of things that are quite, you might think are obvious, like, you know, be attentive and be friendly, you know, don't be dismissive of ideas, don't sit on your phone. You might think those things are obvious, but they need to be called out sometimes, that, you know, you are representing the company when you interview as well. And that goes for not just when we're talking about advocacy interviews, we're talking about any interview, period.
And those are really good notes to take, and I will definitely put them in bullet form and share.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I'm getting back into sharing. Now we've talked about developer advocacy. We've talked about you being a software engineer prior to being an advocate.
Yes.
And there's a talk that you have done, which I absolutely love. And this question has so many layers, because I'm wondering, well, the talk is titled How to Kill a Software Engineer.
I destroy, but yeah.
How to destroy, yes. And I wonder from like a call for papers perspective, how you came up with the title and what was running through your mind, how to write a good call for papers, but the talk itself as well, how you've managed to just keep making it interesting. And yeah, just tell me about the process, because I love this talk. I've heard a lot of your talks, and this one right now is one of my favorite ones.
Thank you. Oh, I love when people tell me that. And actually, I think that's something we should be open to giving people feedback of. I really loved your talk, or I learned this from you. Because obviously you've told me that about this one. I went through a CFP for this recently. I'm going to give a slightly different version of this conference, this talk at a conference in a few weeks. And someone actually connected with me on LinkedIn and talked about how they saw this and were actually inspired to start sharing their own story, because a lot of the themes resonated. And that's one of the things that just gives me so much joy as a speaker, that, you know, I've helped someone realize that their experience and their story is relevant to share with people. Because I love the situation where it's harder for me to get into, I know it sounds really odd because I'm putting myself out of a job, but making it harder for me to kind of get accepted onto conferences because we have so many new, amazing, up and coming speakers with fab stories and perspectives that I can learn from. Like, that's awesome. But going back to how I built the talk, and then we can talk about themes of the talk, because you asked both of those questions. This talk came out because I spend a lot of time at conferences and on booths, and I use a lot of my experience as a software engineer and a lot of my stories of things that I've experienced and practices that I've seen. And what was coming across was a lot of the experiences were still there. And that made me feel a bit sad that actually some of the poor practices were still there, even though I've been in tech for 13 years now. So I also wanted to cover, because we have an observability solution, things around alerting, metrics, and, other choices around tooling and things. But that's not I didn't want it to be so narrow, because I have so many other thoughts and opinions that it kind of came under this generic cultural anti-patterns thought. So I was seeing that, and then I was also seeing like colleagues and other people coming across and talking about, the same kind of things as well, but being more narrow. So I wanted to just have a checklist strategy saying, these are the things that you shouldn't do, and this is why. And I wanted a title that was going to be, okay, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but also impactful. Now, I know I'm not great at writing titles. I'm getting better at it. But when you're writing a title for a talk, it has to be, explanatory of what it is. It needs to have a punch. It needs to not be offensive. Like, I know some people use, what particular words or terms for the sake of being slightly controversial, but there's a balance.
Mm-hmm.
So that was why I've kind of put how to destroy. And I wanted something that highlighted that actually these are destructive practices, if you think about it, because some of these, as I've seen them done, can lead to dissatisfaction in engineers, so they end up leaving, particularly if you have these things so embedded that they're difficult to change. And also, for me, I kind of want people to be more aware of them. So that was how I thought about it from an engineering side. But then I also wanted to think about, and it's the other part when you're writing an abstract, you need to think who the talk is for. So I wanted to identify two audiences here. I wanted engineers to know these are things that are not right. And if you're experiencing them and you think these are not okay, your instinct is correct. And here's some tips based on my experience of how you can potentially mitigate these. But coming back to now being a new engineer, which was when I started writing this, I wish I'd got more training on being an engineering manager when I was an engineering manager the first time. Because now I tried my best. I read, there's some fab books out there, and obviously the book ecosystem in engineering management has grown significantly since I started as a manager, whenever it was. But sometimes you wish you just had a checklist of what not to do, not just what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I wanted to say to managers as well, right, you're now transitioning from an engineer into a manager. These are things that are not okay to do and are not okay to support within your team. And also, if you do these things, this is potentially what's going to happen. You're going to have engineers leave, which means you have, work and effort to hire and replace them. And you have to deal with things like the knowledge gap and the gap in productivity that's been left. But then you also have, this notion of you could potentially burn people out. And that's something that certainly post-pandemic we are all super aware of. And you don't want to be that manager that does that. So, and I've burnt out in the past as well. It's not pleasant. So let's just avoid that, shall we? So what I started with just a series of bullet points when I wrote the abstract. Well, I wrote a more detailed abstract first. So quite often when you do a CFP, there's the actual abstract, which I like Anna from the DevOps committee's rule on an abstract is it needs to fit on a phone screen because that's the draw that's luring you in. So I had a really short kind of generic one of this is, the hook of what things are we doing that are basically leading to burnout and poor productivity. And then in the longer definition, I had the bullet pointed ones of what you've not to do. And I played with the style of it a bit because obviously how to destroy, you could turn it into being really ranty. And the first time I did it, I was not. It's really weird. I did a trial run with my husband. So my husband's also a software engineer.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's not ranty enough. But I know of my style that I can't be too ranty. There are some fabs out there that can do the ranty style.
Yeah.
I'm not that person. I need to lean more towards the ranting with hope, which is how I ended up with the structure of this, of having all the bullet points, saying what's wrong, and then at the end of each section, saying what you should do instead, and summarising what you should do right at the end. So moving on to what I actually talk about in the talk, after I'd planned all the CFP, the things that I was seeing that I wanted to talk about were alerting and on-call practices, because obviously that fits with the observability tooling that we have at Elastic. I wanted to talk about metrics, because this was something when I was a Scrum Master that really annoyed me no end. And I feel like we misuse them. But it also relates quite well to, things like observability and, SRE practices as well. I wanted to cover code reviews, and I was actually inspired by a colleague of mine who did a fab mini talk on it, and I expanded it with my experiences because I'd seen some really nasty experiences as a manager, and I wanted to call those out. I talked about testing anti-patterns, but mainly around flaky tests, because by this point I was realising I was running out of time, because quite often I was trying to figure out how long this talk should be. So tests got really shrunk. Tool explosion and choice, because that's something I see in my job all the time. And also sometimes when people choose the wrong tool and things like that. And then talking about schedules and how we actually prioritize work, and then lack of opportunity to attend conferences or making it hard. And that was based on first-hand experience as well. So I kind of combined them all together into a strategy of saying, these are, in my experience, bad things. And I'm pretty sure I've missed some. So if anyone's additions, please let me know. And from there, I found that actually those resonate, but it's also a nice talk because I can, depending on the conference, I can also cut sections out that are not relevant. So it worked out actually quite as a nice wee strategy.
Okay. No, that's really nice. I like how you break it down, just even the thinking process of writing a CFP and then going on to prepare the talk and actually doing the talk.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I really like that you say that if anyone has not seen this talk, please do it. And you mentioned the testing and the SRE part. I wonder, because this is a talk that I did see. This is one of the first talks that I saw that you did when I reached out to you many years ago. Is any of that public? Because I think that's something that would also be nice to share for people that are more in testing roles or would like to learn more about how you just broke down flaky tests and how to do it better. Do you know? This is a bit off cuff, but because just remember.
No. So for testing anti-patterns generally, I did an old talk on behavior-driven development from DevOps in 2021, which is on YouTube that you can go and have a look at. And that's how to use Cucumber with behavior-driven development. Is, I think, BDD, from what I'm seeing, because I do mention BDD quite often with synthetic monitoring and end-to-end testing, because it has that nice kind of scenario-based syntax that users could understand. I don't see much of it being adopted, but that is definitely on YouTube, that one, and why you should do BDD basically is in there too.
Mm-hmm.
On other resources regarding testing, I mean, there's normally quite a few conferences have testing talks. So I've seen prominent ones at things like Lean Agile Scotland, normally have like in their back catalogue stuff on testing that you might want to have a look at. I've seen Trisha G doing stuff on Dave Farley's like CI channel, for example, on testing recently, which is really good and covers the main anti-patterns. But then also there's all sorts of things on the testing pyramid, what types of testing you should do, the proportion of end-to-end tests compared to unit that's available out there. And then there's numerous books out there on testing as well. So I think for testing in particular, if people want to dive into that, my recommendation is, have a search around for talks for kind of prominent conferences in your language ecosystem, because there will be some there. Also look for books and just be open with the kind of, being open to explore and kind of seeing what people have written on the topic, because there's so much on just testing out there you can learn from.
Yeah, I think the challenge lately that I have seen and with some of my peers is just that it's a lot of information and sometimes it's hard to know, especially when you're just getting started, what's relevant for you and where is the best place to learn and how to learn it, which is sort of the challenge. And that's why I like to refer people that I've actually spoken to and I have learned from, people that I know really break it down. And you're definitely one of those. So yeah, highly recommend people to see your talks. Yeah, so we have talked about your current role and where you were before, but at the same time, your career journey has had so many different phases. You've mentioned being a Scrum Master and maybe other roles that you haven't even talked about because these are just some of the tech roles, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Like, if you just look back on your career, like I would have wanted to find out, like, what are the challenges of being an advocate and what are the sort of highlights? But maybe let's take it back a little bit. If you look at your entire journey, what would you say have been some of the challenges of being in the career path that you are in or journey?
Okay, so if I look at engineering more generally, I think lack of role models is a challenge that I still see. Actually, it is getting better. I'll put some credit in. Lack of visible role models for things I wanted to do was partially an issue. So I was lucky for my sister is actually she's infrastructure and I'm software. So we kind of like, it's like you handle software, I'll handle the software.
Yes.
But my older sister was actually kind of a role model for me because she went into computing first. And I actually, like, way back when I was in high school, I actually did my work experience at her office. So I got to see things like, that's how I saw things like the racks of servers and stuff for the first time, which was really cool. And then realized I wanted to do software and not crawl around or dealing with network cables and stuff like that. But I think I saw throughout my career, lack of role models in not just senior positions, but also senior technical positions was actually something that I found quite difficult. And that led me to try and, it sounds really cheesy, but that's part of the reason why I kind of do this role is I want to be the role model that wasn't there for me with regards to some of those roles. Obviously, there's the notion of generally being a woman in tech, there's also pipeline issues. Quite often I have people making assumptions about my role, which really winds me up no end. I think when we go to conferences, sometimes people make assumptions that, oh, you're not an engineer. I have colleagues that are program managers who sometimes people might assume they are engineer and then they start panicking because they get asked technical questions and they're like, I'm not a technical person, go speak to this. So yeah, but the way to handle that is we just need to be naturally curious and ask questions of, oh, so what do you do? And attach it from that way.
Yeah.
I think also one of the ones that I really actually now think about, saying no to things.
Okay.
Which is really weird. So I've had situations in my career where it's maybe projects or opportunities that to me is, this is great for you, but I have that horrible gut feeling in my stomach that it's not right. And I've had at least 2 occasions where I should have listened to my gut and just said, no, I'm not doing this. I'm going to find another role. But sometimes there's particular points in your career where you're maybe a bit afraid to do that and you just go with kind of the easy option for the moment. So one good example that I speak to a lot of kind of transitioning parents about, like first-time parents, is coming back to work and maybe you have a change of project, which is what happened to me, or you're trying to adjust to, the challenges and the working with sleep deprived and all those other things. And sometimes you might want to stick with something that might not necessarily fit. And then, it can manufacture into a bigger issue. I think sometimes it's okay to say no to things and why, and say this is the right opportunity for me. Just because someone offers it to you and says it's good for your career doesn't mean that that's actually the situation. I think challenges for advocacy specifically, there's a lot of context switching.
Yeah.
You need to be organized and you also need to be self-driven to identify the right things to do. Particularly when it comes to DevRel teams, you're normally bringing in advocates that come from different language ecosystems, have different experience, and might focus on different topics, but also will put them forward in a different slant. And we need to encourage that, but that also means that when you're an advocate, you need to be self-driven. You need to be able to context switch between answering questions on forums, building content, managing your calendar, booking your travel yourself.
Yes.
Things like that. Travel can be difficult leading into that. Certainly, I've seen roles pop up where there's maybe travel requirements of 50% of your time plus. I'm never going to do a role with a 50% plus travel requirement.
Unfortunately, I wouldn't either.
Well, when I was younger and I didn't have, dependents, and I didn't have, a tiny human that needed to pick up from school. Yeah, sure. That would have been really cool. Because obviously sometimes you might get a bit of time to explore the place. Not always, because you will spend most of your time in a conference hall while you're there.
Yes.
But travel can be a difficult juggle. For me, I found it not so bad, because that was initially something I discussed in my interview process, actually. The things that have made me realise that I could do this job is, firstly, I have a very supportive team at Elastic that are aware of balance. And it's okay for me to say no to particular events if they don't make sense, or I've got colleagues across the world that I can see if they're available instead. But also, I couldn't do it without my partner, my husband, because, when I'm traveling, someone needs to pick up my son.
Exactly.
Sorry. And I'm lucky that I've got that as well, because I know not everyone has that.
That's true.
And then I think the final thing is I'm seeing a lot of debate around this notion of an advocate versus an influencer.
Yeah.
Yeah, like everything is awesome. Use all this stuff because we're amazing. It's cringy.
Very cringy.
You're meant to influence an authentic voice.
Absolutely.
It's not about, I don't know if you remember this. I remember this. And every time I mention this advert from Intel from, I think it was from the 90s or the early noughties, I have loads of people just staring at me going, what are you talking about? But it's an Intel engineer walking into the office with sunglasses on as if he's a rock star, and it's all the other engineers are cheering and kind of this is the rock, and they're this is our rock stars, and I can't remember, this is really bad, but I can't remember who it was, but it was this notion of our rock stars that are engineers that build fantastic stuff. That was kind of the point of the advert. And I worry sometimes with developer advocacy, we think that that's what it means to be an advocate, this person that's jetting off with their sunglasses, giving a talk, and then just kind of disappearing off to the next country. You need to be an authentic voice. You need to be able to speak to developers and answer their questions. And sometimes you're going to deal with aspects of developer frustration when things don't work.
Exactly. And on the developer side, it's both ways, the internal and external ones.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because that's a fair point. Sometimes, obviously, if you're building something for your company and your code's internal, I'm probably not going to have visibility to that. But if you're posting stuff on the forums, that doesn't mean that you post exactly the full code snippet. So if we ask you for information, it's okay to obfuscate particular things. So, please obfuscate your keys and your URLs and, things that I'm not supposed to see. And I've been there as an engineer as well. I have a story from when I worked in the bank, and they temporarily suspended access to Stack Overflow at one point because people had put up code that was proprietary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you do need to be a little bit careful, even in this age, and especially with things like AI.
Especially, yeah.
Pasting proprietary code in and saying, what's wrong with this? Why is it not doing what I think it's meant to do? Probably not a good idea.
That's true.
Yeah, so I think generally in the industry, there's all sorts of challenges as an engineer and an advocate, but I think, the challenges can be quite different in my experience. Maybe the context switching. I had that as a manager of engineers, years ago, that text switching was a challenge as well, and you have to be organized. But aside from that, I think that's the only one I've found that's really that common, apart from the obvious debugging and whacking your head off the desk when something doesn't work.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I absolutely can relate to that. My goodness. And it's funny because sometimes it's just such a small problem, but it takes so much from you. And then when you finally make it work, it's like the best feeling, and you forget the many hours that you were just rocking your head on the desk and saying, I hate this. I don't want to do this.
Oh, it's such a buzz and a high when you finally get it working. Like
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that's nice about working from home. You know, I don't have my colleagues looking at me like an absolute nutter when I do my little, yeah, it works code dance. Yes, we all have one. Let's be honest and admit it.
Absolutely.
One of the things about, because I do have a lot of, well, minus obviously conferences where you have to be at a particular place and at a particular time. But I'm lucky at Elastic that I do have a lot of flex with where I work. So I can work from home, I can work from the office in London, which is really great. And that means that a lot of people are not seeing my happy celebrate code dance when it finally works. But I still have one, and that moment is just priceless, even 13 years later. Because that was things that got me into software, was writing code and then having that eureka, it works moment.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like all the pain was worth it with the debugging and all that stuff.
Yes.
And all the random errors you didn't understand. And that notion is priceless. I don't feel like that's changing.
Yeah. I can absolutely relate to that. I feel like it's most of the time in my work. Like, I feel like, oh my God, this is not working. Like just yesterday, I was working on something and it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. And then I got on a call with a colleague, and then he was just like, did you notice that typo? I was like, what?
Been there. Yes, typos but you know what? I think sometimes we're too scared to ask for help sometimes with these ones, and you just need that second pair of eyes. Like,
exactly.
I've had that as well sometimes with little kind of demos, or even some colleagues sometimes. And, pulling somebody onto a call just to be that kind of, even a sounding board, or, the rubber duck, if you will.
Exactly.
Is important, not just for code as well, but also for content. If something isn't flowing the way you expect, or you're not sure that, the definition and the documentation is that clear, running it by somebody else and saying, what do you think of this? I'm not sure this is clear enough, for that second advice can be invaluable. And we still leverage that in terms of, having advocates or engineers review content and code snippets to make sure that it's correct and it makes sense to somebody else and not just you, get out of your own kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're wrapping up, but I don't want to let you go without asking you about AI. We briefly touched on it. At this point, I don't know if it's a buzzword. It's here. It stays. How are you using AI? Because the question is not, are you? It's how are you using it at this point?
So it's funny. Like, I know people that are using ChatGPT and large language models for tons of stuff. And I'm not. Like, I know people that are trying to write abstracts or using it. I've got colleagues that use it for things, particularly if they're trying to write a piece in English when English isn't their first language. They'll use it for kind of translation suggestions and stuff. And I think that's fine because, you've written the authentic content first. But using my program reviewer hat for conferences, because I've been a reviewer before on DevOps and also previously on Lean Agile Scotland as well. When people generate abstracts, quite often they're not checking or even answers in forums all over the place. You need to check it's correct. We're not doing that enough. We're assuming that the LLM's infallible, and they still hallucinate, even if you're using things like RAG, so retrieval augmented generation architectures, where you provide the relevant documents and it generates based on the response. It's still possible that it can hallucinate and get something wrong. You need to check things. So where I am using AI, it's the very rare occasions for ChatGPT or Gemini or something. Not that often, but occasionally it is useful. Most of my AI usage is things like large language models and AI tooling in kind of toy examples. So think literally within the last week, I wrote and published a piece on Search Labs on AI tools using AI SDK by Vercel. So
Okay.
that was quite cool as a JavaScript and TypeScript engineer to play with, using vector search. And some, obviously, vector search, for those who don't know, is where the comparisons are based on mathematical similarity between two vectors, aka stream of numbers. So I'm using those things to build content and talks out of, and play with different tech, like different models. So I played with, obviously, the OpenAI and some of the Llama 3 models. And I also started using a tool for running them locally called Llama, which is quite cool as well.
I haven't heard of it, actually.
It's cool.
It'd be nice to try.
Yeah, go play with it afterwards. That's the thing. A lot of my stuff at the moment is, playing and tinkering and seeing what these things can do, building toy examples, and seeing what other cool use cases either customers or developers are doing with it. I'm not sure I'm convinced on using it for writing my own abstracts and titles yet. Maybe titles are not so bad because it's quite easy to sanity check, but my abstracts are still my own because I feel like it's my authentic voice and I know it's factually correct, or if it's not factually correct, it's on me because I've, researched it or whatever.
Yeah.
What about you? Are you using it at all, or?
Yes, I am, but mostly I'm using generative AI tools, and I'm mostly using it to enhance my productivity and efficiency and basically planning my everyday life. Because as you know, I have a son, and one of the things that I really don't like in this world is cooking, thinking of what to eat, and scheduling the whole week.
Yeah.
So I just plug in, prepare a weekly menu for me with a shopping list, but it has to be nutritious for a 5-year-old and take into consideration that I am anemic, so it should have lots of iron-rich foods, things like that. And then once that's done, I want recipes that will take less than 30 minutes to prepare. Yeah, so it's things like that.
No, that makes sense. And it's probably something I should maybe play about with more on that regard. I do love cooking and searching for new recipes, so I'm not sure I would use it for that. But particular kind of lists and things in personal life, it probably makes sense to play with more. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's mostly personal life. Yeah, because I need the extra assistant. It's just me, my 2 hands, and my son. So my world is full. I need an assistant.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's been wonderful chatting with you.
Too.
And I've learned in the last couple of years that we have connected, I have learned so much from you. I have gotten so much help from you. Yeah, and it's just amazing following your journey and coming back to you as well for like checks, like, what do you think about this? I truly appreciate your time and pouring into me. Like I agree that when you say that one of the reasons was to be that role model that you were seeking, you are that for me. And I just don't say it because, I have to, but it's really, this. But for people that are going to listen to this podcast and wondering, where can they learn more about you and your wonderful work? Where should they look?
Thank you. I'm in all sorts of places. So I'm on pretty much all the main socials. I think in this kind of modern world, we are a bit fragmented across social medias. So I'm on LinkedIn, X, and Blue Sky. I've got them all summarized on a link tree, so we can put that in the show notes so people can connect.
Absolutely.
I'm on GitHub, just Carly Richmond, so you should be able to find me. And then my personal site is carlyrichmond.com, where I try and keep it up to date as regularly as I can. So I've got, all my prior blogs are there, talks, publications, and also contact me if you want to connect there as well. So, but I don't bite. I'm a friendly person. If you want to come chat and say hi, socials, my site is there. And also if you spot me at a conference, feel free to come and say hi. I'm always happy to chat.
Yeah, I can agree. You're a very friendly person and very approachable.
Thank you.
And also helping. I just have to plug this one in as well.
Yeah.
You're also helping people that are learning to speak, public speaking. That's one of the things that you're also doing, which is amazing. You're really giving back to the community. You're one of those people that, hold your word. So thank you.
Thank you. No, anytime. And I guess if anyone does want to get into speaking, this is a good time to plug the Aspiring Speakers and Aspiring Women Speakers group that I run with my friend Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get into speaking and want a friendly bunch, we do lightning talks, and we're always looking for people to come along with a short 5 to 7 minute talk and share something interesting. So if you're interested, get in touch.
Awesome. And I will link everything in the show notes. Thank you so much, Carly.
Thank you. Bye.